San Diego, and as soon as I saw the video, I was super excited to have him come and talk to us about it. So we pick his brain, and I'll let you do your thing. Is it going to be your way to leave it here?
No, that should be
That's cool.
I just need to sign in to get his screen share.
Okay, that's fine. Get you a water bottle.
I have to sign into Slack. I forgot my password. That's alright. Okay, got it. Click on Alright, I hit start screen share.
Cool.
Alright,
Cool. Yep.
Cool. Alright. Oh yeah. Turn on. Alright, there it is. Alright, so hi, yes, I'm Zach. Thanks for having me here. This talk is creating a video synthesizer with JavaScript and the browser. A little bit about me. I am a web developer at UCF, and I do like online education software for teachers and students. And we recently started to open source our stuff finally, which is I'm super excited about. And I love JavaScript in the browser. This is how much I love JavaScript in the browser. This was me going to my parents' place in Panama City Beach on vacation, and I decided to code something up on the beach. So the inspiration for this talk, there's this little piece of code here that I kind of want to run through, and that will hopefully give you the idea of where I started thinking about this project. So the first thing we do is we're going to get the inner HTML, the entire HTML of some page, and we're going to shove it in a marquee tag, because you can. We're going to get all of these tags, spans, and all the headings and links, and for each of those, we're going to put those in another marquee tag. And did you know marquee has attributes that you can set with speed and direction. And then finally, we have an angle variable, and we're going to loop over that on an interval, and then move every div a little bit, and we're going to do that every millisecond. So let's see if it'll work. Just copy this. All right, so here's the meetup page. I'm just going to dump this code in here and let it go. So it'll come back around. So if you're wondering why you would do this, you shouldn't and you wouldn't. But the kind of the idea is that it's crazy to me that even though this is just using web technology, that the browser kind of has this built in and it will handle it. I'm sure that the code behind it is awful, but it does work. So what were the lessons learned from that little experiment? That the browser is powerful, and that the marquee tag still works. So when I gave this presentation, it said 2018 there, and now I can update it. It's still working in 2019. The other part of the inspiration of this talk is some of the stuff I've been getting into as far as music. So there's this thing out there called modular synthesis. I will let this YouTube video, Andrew Hong, explain basically a quick 30-second introduction about what it is.
Here we have some audio, just a basic tone being sent out of this module grades. Here's what happens when I take some CV from maths that cycles through a rising and falling pattern and patch that to control grades pitch. Now we can take another channel of Matt's to send CV to modulate the speed at which that first channel rises and falls. So we're just scratching the surface here.
And sorry, 1 second, I gotta share. I'm not showing all the screen. Entire screen.
Okay.
Is that good?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. No problem. Okay, so you don't have to get all of that. The general idea was that there's these little modules that produce sound, and you can, or they basically are, it's all voltage, and you can then hook those little inputs and outputs together to send those signals through the system, and you can make music that way, and you can make music that will just kind of go and go and go, introduce randomness, and just generate a whole soundtrack if you wanted to. So you might be wondering what the hell this has to do with Docker. It's a bunch of inputs and outputs, and the instance is not functional as far as you have a bunch of functions and you have inputs and you have outputs. I mean, that's math. And the third piece of inspiration for this was kind of generative art. So this is something I built a while back. It's just a album art generator, which is just fancy talk for it makes a bunch of SVGs at random. And if I click on one of these, it will download a 2000 pixel by 2000 pixel image. And just to prove it's real, I can click that, and it will just keep generating these. But when I made this project, part of the problem was that I just had this code open. I would tweak the code and then run it, and then I would want to like maybe change the colors or change the way it was working. So I go back into the code and then change it again. But I thought it'd be really cool to have some sort of interface to be able to then make those code changes, like the numbers of how many triangles I'm making. If I could just tweak that on the page without having to edit the code every time. The fourth part of the inspiration, I showed you, or at least I kind of breezed through modular synthesis with audio, but audio is just a signal, so you can do the same thing with video. So this is a picture of a video module, which you can see like the red, green, and blue channels. So something you can do with this is you can manipulate video the same way you can manipulate audio. So this is a local artist here in Orlando, and this is one of his performances. And he's taking either generating or taking a video signal and then manipulating it with hardware. So that kind of harkens back to this project, or this product called the Atari Video Music, which came out in 1977. And what it is a visualizer that you give it audio and it produces images on your TV screen. And as far as I know, the first use of this commercially was in the background of a Devo video, which I want to play a second of, because why not? So it's this background diamond pattern that's happening. That's the Atari Video Music. So yeah, and you can still get those on eBay now. They're around $500. It's not awful. But yeah, there's little knobs on there that you can tweak the parameters and tweak the visualizations. So all that stuff I really like and I think is really interesting, but it's very kind of lo-fi on purpose and kind of smudgy and gritty. But I kind of like a lot of the digital look of some of the more modern kind of visualizations that have been coming out there. So here's two examples of something that is kind of more what I'm looking for. And then just one more example. So, what I was thinking is, this is digital, so it's kind of in the JavaScript web browser computer realm. Could I create videos like this, but could I create them live as I was performing music? And you know, you saw that was just a bunch of squares. making squares is the first thing you always do when you start a Canvas tutorial on the web and you need to draw something. You call draw rect and you get a square. So, I could make this with Canvas or SVG elements. So, wrapping all that up, the idea for the talk was that there's all this stuff the browser can do, all these APIs. We have CSS animations, Canvas, WebGL, SVG, we have video, we have libraries like Three.js and Pixie.js, which is more 2D oriented. We have Web Media API, proximity, web animations, media capture and streams, etc. And it seems almost monthly I learn about a new API that's coming out, it's in development, or that it's kind of in Chrome. So then, the big idea is that on the computer realm we have all of these devices, and these devices are like our audio or our signal generators. So we have like a mouse, we have a gamepad, MIDI devices. Let's see if I can. So all of these devices that we have are generating what I kind of think of as like that's signals that they're generating. Thank you. So for example, I'm listening to the gamepad API, web MIDI capturing strings, and just regular DOM events we've always used since forever. And then those are kind of sending data out. And so then on the input side, we have all these components in the browser that we can take that data in and process it in some degree. And this is kind of an abstract representation of what I'm trying to build. But we can kind of map all these technologies and glue them together. And then we can, the big idea is to be able to then change the routing of how all this stuff is connected. And then that can change the graphic visualization that we're generating from that connection. So then, demo of the actual software itself. This is the thing I built. It's called VidKit. It is live, and I'll give you, there's a link to it at the end, but it's vidkit.app. I'll mention that again later. But we have the purple nodes here. Those are our signal generators. And then these gray nodes are the things that then process that data. So as I move the mouse around, it is changing the display up here. I can full screen this display. So this would be what it would look like if I was actually using the visualization and not building it. This is just a simple example because it's just showing you the mouse coordinates right now. But I can then go in, for example, here's this node that is taking the input that it's getting, which is the mouse, and then changing the element inner text to the value of the X property. So hopefully, if I code this live right, so now we're changing the code of node. Now I'm taking that X value from the mouse and I'm going to use it to transform the element. This may or may not work. It works, okay. Yeah, so now I have updated the visualization just by manipulating the code live. And then, obviously it's not very useful, but you can do it. So just a brief overview of how that works. You have what I call the screen. That's an iframe, and that's where the visualization takes place. You have these nodes. On the left of each node are the inputs, and on the right are the outputs, and you can connect those together. Each node has a web component, a native web component, which is the UI. Not all of them have to have that, but some of them do. All of the inputs have a UI to be able to turn them on and off. So in this example, I've kind of expanded this so that I can edit that property directly with the mouse. Or in the example of this one, it's changing its value based on what's coming out of that other node there. And yeah, that's the inputs and outputs. So how that works is we have Node.js. Oh, sorry, not Node.js, but this is my node JavaScript class, which is confusing. But yeah, that's the nodes that you saw. There's a class where it has the outputs and inputs. And that gets evaled So that's when I was editing the code live. When I saved that code, it evals that code. A web and it's an JavaScript shadow that you with React manages themselves and everything. The state is what and and finally, the screen, which is the actual visualization iframe, is simply just HTML and CSS that you then shove into an iframe every time you modify it, and all of the nodes have access to the iframe. So I wanted to touch on, I'm sure many of you are familiar with web components, but just in case you aren't, it is a native standard that I believe is still not ready in Safari, but otherwise in Edge, but mostly in other browsers it's there. Basically, you can define your own HTML elements. You get a couple of functions with these. So connected callback is what gets called when your custom element gets attached to the DOM. Disconnected is when it's removed. And then the observed attributes is if you think of a custom element, you can have attributes in that element. If those attributes change and you observe them, then you get a callback with attribute change callback. So that's when, for example, if you have a component and it has name equals Bob and you change it to Rod, you would get a callback here and with the new and old value of that property. And what that looks like here might be maybe I make a user icon, kind of like a React component. I have to tell the browser I want to, whenever you find user-icon in the page, I want you to use my user icon class, and then I can actually put it in the page like this. Or you can use DOM manipulation, so you can do document.create as well. So I have a bunch of code examples at this URL. I'll keep it in the corner of a lot of the slides, so if you don't write it down, if you do, it's fine. But this is what it looks like. I have a bunch of code examples of all the stuff I'm going to kind of show you today. Boiled down to the most simplest form. So as far as you want to like attach or read from a webcam, or you want to read from a gamepad, it's trying to reduce all of the variables into just the bare minimum of what you need to make it work. So the actual iframe screen visualization, how that is actually kind of crazy. All you need to do is content window open, write the HTML, close it, create a new tag, and then shove the HTML and style into it, and then, or sorry, shove the CSS into that head style tag that you create, and then you created your own iframe dynamic. And I said earlier that I use eval to process the code. And eval is known to be kind of an exploit, kind of a bad thing, an old JavaScript thing that you shouldn't do. In fact, Douglas Crockford mentions it in one of his books, never to use it. But I want to make an amendment that if it's a weird art project, it's probably okay. It's actually kind of punk rock. Because it's crazy to me that you can have a browser which has all this rendering capability with this language that's so flexible, and then you can modify the language while it's running. It's really kind of cool. So, to be evil, in case you've never evaled before because it's discouraged that you might not even have seen how to do it, is you can pass it a string to this function eval, which is just globally scoped, and then that will run that code. You can understand why that might be a bad idea, for example, if you have a server module and you just eval the code that the client sends to the server, and your eval code is giving all the users and all the passwords, that would be bad. Another way to do it is you can create a new function. This is actually built in, it's always been built into JavaScript, where you can make a new function with 2 parameters and then the code in the function, and then you get that function back out. Which, when I say eval, this is actually what I'm doing, but it was cooler to say that I evaled it. So then getting back to the demos, now we can use the power of CSS to work with this drum machine here. So let's see. Hopefully this will focus. Maybe. Well, okay, I'll just pick it up. So this is the Roland TR-8S. This is a drum machine sampler that I have. And what it does is through this cable here, sends MIDI information, and that is basically a signal that tells the computer what notes I'm playing. And so I have this visualization here, so if I click this button, what I have set up to happen is these circles here will then randomly move to a location. So you can see that a couple times. They'll just move around. And if I look at what that code looks like, here's the actual, when I talked about the iframe and all that generation, that's what this looks like. So here's all the circles I have. And the reason that they're smoothly moving back and forth is I just have a transform and a transition on those so that whenever that circle moves to a different size and location, the browser will just handle the animation for me. So I also have this wired up so that, let's see. So here's a module I have that is mapped to the notes for this device. So if I send the note on into here, and then I can send the instruments into this, each of these guys. Oh. So now when I hit one of these, and I'll full screen it. So right now I have this kick drum tied to that white circle. The snare drum is the yellow circle, and then the hats are the other circles. So now that is controlling this visualization. Now that's just circles. We don't have to just do circles. This is another visualization, but with SVG graphics, but it's the same idea. So all that's doing is it's just changing, it's just 2 frames of animation, and when it gets the signal, it is switching to the other frame of animation, and then after a delay, switching it back. So I talked a little bit about MIDI, so I just needed to make a quick transition into what that is fully. So take yourselves back to 1981, and electronic music is kind of coming to the forefront. You might have like a keyboard or a synthesizer or something, and this thing produces audio for you. Maybe this is like a Moog or something like that, a Yamaha. And you might have like a drum module that produces drum beats, kind of like this one here, and then that's going to produce drum beats. And then you might have another sampler over here, but the problem is all of these pieces of hardware don't speak the same language, so they can't really communicate to one another. But then that's where MIDI comes in. So what MIDI does is it lets them communicate, and the way that works is if I press a note on, for example, this keyboard, it'll produce a sound, but it will also produce a note message. So it's saying, hey, someone has pressed a note, you've pressed C3, I don't know what you want to do with that, but there you go. If you press a different note, it might produce a lower pitch and also a different note on a message. And just to be clear, this is a traditional keyboard, but this is set up so each of these pads is just another note number, and I can change the note number if I need to, but it's basically the same as the keyboard. So what that looks like is this. Each message is split up into these 4 parts. You have the message, so this is like a note-on message. MIDI's defined 16 channels with which to operate, and then which note it was played, and then how hard you press the key. And then really that's just a binary stream that's being sent at a certain rate. And here's some examples of MIDI messages, and not just notes. If I mess with the pitch or the tempo or some of these knobs, it will send all that message back. And what's cool is the browser, at least in Chrome, you can access that stuff. So I don't want to go too in-depth in the code, but because there's the link again will give you the code examples. But the general gist of it is you can just say, hey, I want browser, I need MIDI access. Give me all the inputs you have. Let me listen to all the messages. And then when I get a message, I can do whatever I want with it. Similarly with the gamepad, the gamepad works a little bit differently, but it's a similar idea. You listen for gamepad connected. There's an index, so you just get the index that you want, and you use request animation frame, which will happen 60 frames a second. You'll get this callback where you can get a reference to that gamepad and then query the access to which buttons are being pressed. So another thing we can use this for is for video. So I have a webcam here. I will switch to it. Hopefully that works. So what this is doing is there's the video canvas and there's another canvas on top. It's sampling the pixel values and then overlaying it. So here you go. And what you can do with this is you can change the pixel size. And of course, again, I could send a signal into that. I can change the margin size of the pixels. Let's see. This might work. Let's see. Okay. So I've mapped the gamepad here to the size in between, and then I can control that like that. So, how to use the webcam? You can ask for video. You use Navigator, get user media. You get the video out. You get a stream element back. You can create a new video element and then basically shove the source object, that's the stream you got. You just set that and hit play, and now you have a video element that's taking feed from the webcam. Similarly, what I did with that is I had the video and then I had the canvas on top that was sampling the pixels. That's as easy as doing this context, drawing an image of, you can just pass it the video element onto the canvas you want to draw, and then this is what it looks like as far as sampling the pixel data. I can just do get image data and I can specify I want a 1x1 square of what I'm looking at. So, we can combine the two things. So let's see, we got a webcam, we got our MIDI device. Let's do this better. Sorry. All right, so let's full screen that. So what I have happening here is on the kick drum, I'm doing a flash effect, and on this chord sound, I randomly do a transition on the z-axis to rotate, as well as randomly transition the canvas that's on top. And again, CSS transitions are handling the animation for me. So if I just let this play. Yeah. So there you go, music video and JavaScript. So you're wondering like, oh, this is neat. What are the problems with it? There's a lot of problems with it. All right, so I mentioned I'm using React and Web Components. I learned out halfway through this project that was a terrible idea. You should not do it. But unfortunately, I didn't have time to kind of retool anything. I had to just kind of trudge forward and make it work. So the problem is when you put a web component on top of a React element, React kind of has its virtual DOM diffing, and it kind of does manipulations of DOM for you. That ends up taking that web component on and off the DOM, and that triggers those callbacks. If you remember, I mentioned earlier the disconnected and connected callbacks. So my solution to that was to circumvent and create my own callbacks. Another problem is when I go to edit the web components, when I go to, like you saw me edit the code and save it, that creates a new web component. But you can't have a web component with the same name as one you've already created. So I just append the timestamp, and that's how I make new web components, and they just keep building up into the memory of the system. When you do get attribute on a DOM element, see up there, there's this wall that appears in this graphic. This is using Three.js to generate the scene. I can trigger those walls. I can also, because this is just a web element, so I can use CSS filters, like Instagram filters. So I can change, I can make it, that's how I did the black and white effect on the other visualization. And I can change the colors of the whole scene. So I've rigged up this song to send its many messages to the visualization in Three.js. So it's about a minute long, I'll just let it play. Yeah. So the kick drum is controlling the walls, and a little bit, the notes will trigger an update on the CSS filter to hue rotate and change the colors of the scene. So then the snare drum is then doing a background effect, and that's just changing a square in the Three.js environment to switch the color back and forth. So, code examples again, all here. The app is vidkid.app. The code is open source if you want to submit pull requests. I have an Instagram if you're interested. I'm local to the area. And This last one is just taking the internal microphone on my laptop and then sending it to transition the back this thank you text, which I will full screen because the talk is done. So thank you. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for Zach?
Yeah, sorry, any questions? I'm sorry.
Go back one slide where you're in
Contact.
contact information on it. One more.
Yeah, sorry. Yes.
So it's kind of curious, so with like WebAssembly and things, have you kind of like looked into that and sort of?
I would love to, I haven't yet.
Yeah, but I think this would really help with performance.
Absolutely. No, that would be really awesome because, you know, I've seen, you know, like Minecraft and all that stuff built in WebAssembly, so it would be sweet. Yeah.
You wrote the entire like vid kit in React. All
It's-
the different all like the little tables, the SVG
Yeah,
connections.
yeah.
Was that and then I saw we're using 3JS, but have you looked into like how are like the 3JS wrappers in React? Is it easier just to use it in 3JS?
So I didn't really need to do that per se. Oh, whoops.
I'm just curious, 'cause I know there's wrappers with 3JS. And
So if I look
I was
at,
looking through the vid kit, and I think you just use everything in plain 3JS.
yeah, so it's a bit of a hack. 3JS is included on the page and then you just have access to it here. But as far as this code, each of the nodes, that's pure JavaScript. Well, it's my little custom class, but otherwise it's pure JavaScript. So that part isn't React. That part is the kind of custom web component. It's the React part is this part, the
Yeah, where you
moving
actually
along.
update and write the inputs.
Right.
That's all React inputs.
Right.
Configured, and then everything is just like position relative absolute. You just drag it around.
Yeah.
And it updates.
Yeah.
That.
Yep.
It's really cool.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Have you thought about creating an app for this? Because I mean, there's already Snapchat,
Um,
and stuff like that, but it's not as artsy as this,
Right.
which I really like. And so like the idea is like, I don't know, maybe using the little SDK to record your voice. And so like long distance numbers, I think about. And then turning that into art or something, I don't know.
Right, yeah, so that's kind of exactly it. I built a bunch of demos to kind of showcase it, but what I like is it's really just signal processing. So if someone was to build, like for example, a socket IO node, then you could have two computers where there's a socket, to socket IO and from socket IO node, and as long as you just gave it the right port to speak to theoretically, it would be able to send those signals then through the network. Because right now this is all just kind of like running locally on my machine. So I would like to kind of expand it so that, I don't know, because I don't think it needs to be just for visualizations. That's just kind of my initial thought for where it could go. But I kind of want to do it for more complicated MIDI processing for some of my own music and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm open to it. It's just a matter of time and devotion to it.
Are you playing any shows around here?
I am. I've played a couple at the Nook on Robinson. If you follow my Instagram account, that's where I kind of try to spam that. I don't have anything lined up yet, but I'm working on a new live show that hopefully I want to do maybe in the next 2 to 3 months or something like that.
So touching on that, what's your live show setup? Is it similar to what you have there?
So the end goal is to use this in my live show setup. That was the whole kind of impetus, was to have live visualizations. I don't think this is ready for a whole show yet, just because it's built on one single scene. And what I want to kind of do is then expand it to do multiple scenes. So I'm working towards that. The live setup is a lot more of this. For so far, I don't have a laptop in that setup. I usually have like a bunch of gear that's connected, and it's focused, like there might be 1 or 2 drum modules, and then a couple of like sequencers, and then samples, and those are all kind of sequenced. And I try to kind of seamlessly transition to a couple of songs. And the thing I want to do now is try to do a little bit more improvisational stuff. to be able to kind of tweak it a little bit more and stuff like that. So, anything else? Yeah.
When you started this, were you already sort of familiar with the visualization scene?
Not really. Like that YouTube video, the digital one that I showed you, I had seen some of that stuff, and that was kind of the inspiration. But as far as like Max for Live and all of that stuff out there, I had no idea that that was out there. And I know there's a couple of artists here in Orlando that do some of that stuff, which I can, I don't remember her name, but if you're interested, I can send you. I think she's doing a presentation tomorrow on how to use Touch Designer, if you're interested. But yeah, so I haven't had the time to really focus in on it. It was kind of like an experiment to try to get that stuff built. And at least my take was, after learning that all that stuff existed, I was like, well, I guess it's the same thing, it's just in a browser. So I'm happy about that. But yeah, I want to kind of expand and focus a little bit more on that stuff and see if I can incorporate that as well.
Your visualization is very written instead of Tron.
Yes.
All you need are the rectangles.
Yes, I actually did in an earlier version have some lines that were kind of tronning around, but I had to take it out. Another factor? Yeah.
Yeah, I was also curious, like, what was your like artistic expression before this? Did it involve this kind of technology, or just like?
Yeah, it's a lot of work in Illustrator and Photoshop. I do some graphic design, and so my art kind of follows that. You know, I had a painting class in high school, you know, but yeah, it's mostly kind of digitally focused stuff. And my coworker Ian followed for a while this guy called Joshua Davis. So I kind of started in the Flash days when Flash wasn't that bad of a word, and got kind of into that scene. And he does a lot of generative art as well. So that's kind of some inspiration. And I think a lot of the browser has kind of caught up to some of the weird stuff that Flash was doing, and now can run a lot better. So I'm happy about that. Any other questions? All right, that's it.
Thanks again, Zach, for coming in, sharing some of that awesome stuff with us. We're gonna take a quick, like 10-minute bathroom break for you to get up, stretch, use the restroom, and then we're gonna come back to this.
Actually, I did a talk.
We have To start Orlando Talks, we have 4, so that's awesome. We start here. All right, so first one is Dwayne.
So I don't really have like any coding stuff, but there's that Google I/O is happening, I think, still, and there's a lot of cool stuff. So if you're not familiar, it's just kind of like where Google comes out and says, "Hey, check out all these cool things we've been doing for like the past year since the last one," and so you can just go check it out. YouTube the channel, and like today I was watching something about like a WebAssembly for web developers, and they have all type of new things. Yes, so you can just go there, see all the different talks and things. It's cool because they have like the keynote and they talk about, you know, the new phones and all the new services and stuff. But like throughout the day, they kind of have like all these little different sessions where they just kind of talk about all the different new APIs coming out and what's happening in Chrome and all these other cool things. So it's just kind of, you know, helpful. And then,
Firebase, look at that.
oh, Firebase is the greatest thing ever. If you don't know, it's amazing. And so yeah, so there's all type of cool stuff to go on and have. So if you're into all these things, like talking about the newest thing in Chrome and then now, so if you're into Flutter, because Flutter is like, I think you use Kotlin or something like that to build like, it's like one code base and you can build iOS and Android.
It's Dart.
Native apps. Is it in Dart? Something like that. But now they have this thing called Flutter where you, the same code can go for the web also. So if you're into that stuff. So there's a lot of cool things.
So kind of like React Native Web.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so it's kind of cool. And then I think I saw some people, or somebody told me that Svelte, they were talking about it in, I guess, the dev channels or whatever. So Svelte, SVELTE.dev. And if you don't have it, .dev is an actual thing now that you can actually get. So mine is lifelong.dev. And but this is pretty cool. I'm a big fan of like HyperHTML and LintHTML. You mentioned that also. So it's similar, and you can create. It helps create web apps, and it compiles into your code. Whereas like React, you still need to extend the React component and all this other stuff. This one just compiles to the code, and you ship that. So you don't need any sort of framework or things like that. So it's 3.0 just came out I think a couple of weeks ago, and has like a really good step through kind of just work your way through it. So just some stuff I thought was kind of cool. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Dwayne. I wanted to talk about 2 things real quick. So the first one is Material UI. For those of you that work with React, Material UI, as you can read here on the website, is components for React that implement Google's material design. What this is a set of best practices and a design system that Google put together that looks really cool, and it has really cool design and also behavior. And I'm just going to jump into an example here because that's the first of the 2 things that I want to talk to you about. So this is a regular button. As you can see, this is on the left here. That is the code, the React code that's rendering this button on the right. So pretty plain, like nothing really special or attractive about it. So I'm going to add Material UI to it. I've already npm installed it, so I'm just going to import all the things that's needed. What I'm doing here is I'm importing the button component, and I'm importing what this is a higher order function. This is the second thing I'm going to talk about today. And the styles. What I have here is CSS in JavaScript, right? So this is just a mapping of what the CSS is as a JavaScript object. Is one of the different ways you can specify style in JavaScript apps. For now, I'm just going to use the button component. I'm not going to add any style yet. I save this, and it should render. So this is a button, and then you can see there's a hover already, and when you click, you can see that the propagation is actually coming from where the mouse is. So that's pretty slick, right? Now I'm going to add the styles and make it a little bit more attractive. And the way that you do this with Material UI and using CSS in JS is using higher order components. So what I'll do is I'll call the with styles function, passing my styles from up here, and that returns a function which I'll invoke giving my app as an argument. And when I do that, app receives a prop, receives props. And from these props, I can extract the class name and then use it, classes, and then going back to styles here, because I want to show you what the styles are, it's called button, right? So this is the name of my class that I want to use within my button. So if I do classes.button, and then you can see that the styles are applied here. Still looks the same, like the click is coming from where the mouse is pointed, right? And a few months ago, a few meetups ago, I did a talk about essential JavaScript for working with React. And this talk was about JavaScript features from the language that frameworks like React leverage to be able to offer its full potential. And what I've found, talking to a lot of developers just coming, especially those just coming into the industry, is that they kind of don't know which, they're not familiar with those features, so that basically leaves a big gap into their understanding of the framework. So they don't really know stuff like object orientation and a lot of the features that are part of the language itself. And one of those include higher order functions. So who here has heard of higher order functions? Right. Higher order functions are essentially a feature that's been in JavaScript since the beginning, but they have been called something else. They have been called functions as first-class citizens. It's nothing different than being able to use functions as arguments and as return values from other functions. So that's what this funky syntax is doing. So with styles is actually returning a function, which then is invoked passing app, which is another function, as an argument, right? And this is a little bit more complicated in this context, but what I want to do is write an example of a higher order function from scratch, right? So let's try and simulate a little bit of what that code is doing, right? So I'll start with a function app, and for the sake, can you all see this code? Sorry, make a little bit. Is that a good size? Okay, cool. So I'm just going to return message. And I'm going to skip the whole rendering thing, and for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to use console.log and log the result of app. Let me have my console. Make this bigger too. So I'm going to call this code, and then you can see that it's printing message here at the bottom, right? Cool. Oh, sorry. There you go. Cool. Now I'm going to write another function. So first I'm going to write my styles, right? So I'm just going to do styles, style, and I'm going to simulate what a button class would be, and just button primary, right? Kind of like using, Bootstrap. So let's just suppose that these are my styles. Now I want to write from scratch what the with styles function would look like. Could look like we're using in this example, like a higher order component, right? Or a function as a first class citizen. So I'm going to have a function call, I'm just going to name the same thing with styles, and this is going to take an object as an argument, right? And then inside here, we're going to have to loop through the styles object and populate what we're going to use as props, right? So I'm just going to call it props. And I'm going to essentially initiate it with an empty object with a classes property to try and make it look as close as possible with Material UI, the way that it does, right? So I'm going to use object.keys to extract the keys from the object that we get as an argument, and then I'm going to for each into the properties from that object. And I'm going to get each key, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use props classes and then create a new property for each class that we have as part of our styles. So I'm going to do that by assigning the key property, and then I'm going to read that value from the style itself. So I'm going to do style.k, right? In this case, we only have one, but if we had more classes over here, it would iterate over each one of them and populate that. Now that we have our props ready to be passed into a component, I'm going to return a function, and this function is going to take some app, some other component, and it's going to return that component, giving it the props, right? So this is where the magic is. We're returning from the with styles function, we're returning another function that takes an argument and then returns a function, right? Now, instead of just app, we're going to do with styles, give it our styles that we have, style singular, here at the top, and then pass app, but we're not going to invoke app anymore. We're going to pass it as an argument. Because remember, functions are first-class citizens in JavaScript, so we don't have to invoke them, we can pass them around as an argument. Now, if everything works, I'll be very surprised, but let's try it again. All right, cool, nothing broke. Now, the one last thing that we forgot to do is actually use the props from our app component. Now, app is actually taking props, and then we can use these props from the string up here. So we can do props and call button, and that should print our BTH primary, and it did. So that's all it's happening behind the scenes, of course, on a larger scale, but that's all that higher order components are in React. They're nothing more than React taking advantage of something that's been in JavaScript since its inception in the mid-90s, and yeah, leveraging that feature. So that's what I wanted to show you today. So thanks.
You also can see this as decorator. We use that a lot in our projects.
Oh, the @ sign, and then, yeah.
That's very common. It's the same thing. So it's basically before the component you see add, the name of the function that's supposed to be like with styles. That's the same idea.
Cool. Yeah, Angular uses that a lot.
I think the thing with the decorator though is that it's not stage 3 yet, and so.
Yeah.
I think that's the only reason why we have these higher order components, otherwise they wouldn't be decorators.
Right. Yeah, it's just because most of the products that they tweak the web back
They
to
keep
handle
tweaking
that.
the decorator so it stays at stage 2.
Exactly.
Right.
What do you mean by stage 2 and 3?
Stage 2, ECMAScript 6. So usually, I think for folks to really start supporting it, it has to reach stage 3, which means they're pretty comfortable with knowing your changes. So, for example, I guess classes, you know, supported by like Babel.
Even so, it takes them reading stage 3 to make these work.
Anybody else can speak up?
But yeah, it sort of gets the different stages basically how likely it is to actually make it into
That still doesn't speak to browser support and adaptation.
Yeah, it doesn't.
But they have all the different browsers, they have all the people that are on the team or any kind of
Yeah.
national level.
The ECMAScript team is basically like all the players that are.
Yeah, that's very great.
How do we pull up AirPlay? It is, what if it's not? AirPlay display. Cafe?
Yeah.
Is that me? No?
Oh, yeah, that's it. You just have to switch the, there you go.
Is it? Whatever.
All right. So I want to show two quick things here. And the first one, not sure if you guys saw that, but every year, there's a website called Front-End Masters, one of my favorite resources to learn about front-end development. And they release every year the front-end handbook. And I was taking a look on this one, this is 2019. And seriously, I work in this like every day, and there's a lot of stuff here that I didn't know. So it's a really good resource to review what they had in the previous year, 2018, and also what they expect to 2019. There's a lot of cool stuff here. Yeah, so feel free to check that link out. It's pretty good. And also, I'm working with a client, and when I was taking a look on this list right here, they get like each stack, like what are the most libraries working along with Angular, with Vue, with React. And I noticed one of the libraries that we are using there, it's called Design, is one of the one that they mentioned here. And to be honest, I never heard about it before I started working on this client, like 4 or 5 months ago. And I'm glad that Carlos talked about the hierarchy function because we're going to see a little bit about this here. So basically, Design, it's similar to Material UI, like Carlos showed. There's a bunch of components that you can use. And to be honest, working in multiple projects, I saw this as like the one that has more components. And also a few more things that I'm going to show later. So as you can see here, it's basically a bunch of UI components. You have like breadcrumb, drop down, pagination. I'm going to go through over a few of them. So you can see the code, how it's going to render. Oh, this is for React, sorry, forgot to mention. And it's overall a UI collection of components. And like I said, there's a bunch of components here that I like. So, but one thing that I think this is different from the others, not sure exactly about the others, but I know React Bootstrap don't have it. So usually when you have to handle like big forms in React, you end up using, you have this concept of control components where you have to literally save your value from the field to a state to read the value. So this is kind of hard if you have like big components, big forms. And so usually what you do, you use like a third-party library to handle that for you, like Redux form or something similar. And what I like from this library itself is that they have the UI for you, but they also have a bunch of helper functions to help with form validation, control components, and all that stuff. So, like Carlos mentioned, they do that using the concept of high-order function and high-order components. So, let's see here. So basically, let me see my code to remember the method name. So one thing that I really like for this one, I have a big form. I can create all my elements, use the input from this library itself, using select, drop down, sliders, a bunch of stuff. And also, the way that they do that, they register the fields using this get decorator. So as you can see here, it's a function which calls the component later. Can you see the code here? Is that okay? Better? Right, so here there's a bunch of rules that you can create for validation. So as soon as I do this for the email field, I already have this available when I try to save this form. So all the fields that I have here, I register here using the get field decorator, which is a higher order function. And I have a bunch of rules that I can create here to handle this form. So I think that's really cool because you usually use one library to handle this and another library to handle the UI. And this one, ND, handle both for you. Let me get another form. Also, if you are trying to go to like a CRUD where you have to edit some form, you can create those form elements before using also a higher function, so which is pretty cool. What else? You have a select component from the ND as well. They have also a different set of inputs. You have input for text, input for number. Anyway, it's just a UI library, but like I said, those helper functions help me a lot, especially on this project. So I can get like initial values from the database and some crazy stuff. Create some fields on the fly, like looping through another, so like an array, create a bunch of fields dynamically. And yeah, that's basically it. I think that's the difference. Probably there's more libraries that do that, but I think this library, it does really well. And when I saw the front-end book, the handbook, it's saying this project is the second most used project for UI on React. I was surprised because I never heard about it. And the only downside for this, at least for me, that I don't speak Chinese, is, yeah, they're from China. So if you go to their GitHub, you're gonna see a bunch of issues. Yeah. And I'm the type of the guy that I don't ask questions on GitHub or anything. I try to see other people's issue and try to figure it out on my own. So this is only the bad part about this one. But like I said, it works really well. I've been working with this ND library for the last 5 months, and I had one issue so far where I couldn't find anything. I think the Chinese guys probably figured something out, but I couldn't understand what they started to say. But that's the only downside for this project. I really enjoyed working so far. So the UI is good. There's a lot of components, and also have a lot of helper functions together. So yeah, that's all I have.
I saw under select, it said like show search. What was that?
Where?
In your code, like you had a select, you showed the select.
The select component?
Yeah, I think it said like show search. I'm just kind of curious right there.
Yeah, so it's a base, like a regular select drop down. If you put the so search prop, you're gonna have, so you can type ahead and filter the select.
Okay. That's part of React?
No, that's part of ND. That's what I said. Their component is really good. They have a bunch of props that you can customize. And they also have the helpers to register, have this kind of two-way binding. Yeah. Yeah, I put this show search and then I have the filter criteria to make the search. So in this case, like it's sensitive case, so I have to convert everything to lowercase, find the element and start filtering, you know? Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, another question? All right, thanks. Anyone else gonna? Who's gonna go? Yeah, Brett. You have HTML?
Do I have HTML?
Or like me? No, you don't have?
I don't.
Oh, you do.
Do I? No, it's.
No.
I have a US.
You can do AirPlay. Like you can do AirPlay.
I have this. I don't know if this is what I use.
That's for HTML?
Yes.
Okay.
I use that because it's an error.
Yeah. Awesome. Where does it go?
Where's the
Well,
HTML?
you can take that out too. I'm picky. I always.
You're
keep
careful,
stuff on top
and
of
so
it.
they last forever.
Because I'm orange.
Where's the HTML cable?
It's attached to this thing. So I'm
Okay.
already-
Here.
Oh, no, you plug it into the.
There we go. And then what?
Oh, I think it's still, you have to change it to HTML. This, I'll do it.
Yeah, right here. Even more than you.
So I can't speak a whole lot for it.
It looked like it was trying to find me. Is this an unplug replug kind of a thing?
So this is mine, so I don't.
Maybe not? My screen is like, my screen thinks that it's being viewed on some other device.
Okay. What? He's using HDMI.
Oh, you're using HDMI? Click on wireless.
Well,
Okay, here, I'll AirPlay, see if that works.
Yeah, no, I've never seen the. I know this switches automatically when you pull up the Apple TV. I don't know what goes on before. Trying to figure it out with you.
I need the AirPlay code and everything. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Second intermission. All right. I wanted to talk just a little bit about learning stuff because we're here for learning. How many people are kind of new-ish, like consider themselves a little bit new? Okay, good. This is for you. I miss you people. Hi. How are you doing? Enjoying learning? Good. I started playing around with Gatsby a little bit this year. Who has heard of Gatsby? Everyone heard of? Some people have heard of Gatsby. Gatsby is a really cool way of making static sites, React-based. They have this store which also highlights how welcoming they are as a project. You see the stuff over on the left. If you open in PRs into the Gatsby project, they will send you things. You can get like, their shirts, they have socks, they have, I think my favorite thing is the freelance pants. That's just a great name. Everybody should have some of that. And also, they're really committed to working in the open, so much so that the entire store that you just saw, which is a real live thing that takes money from people and sends out goods, lives on the internet, 170 some commits. And so if you're wondering to yourself, especially if you're fairly new, how much code would it take to make a working real live store? Well, they have one on here. You can go through and see all the components that they use and all the functions that they wrote, and all the code that goes into a real live working thing, which I think is just phenomenally cool. So that's one. And then another thing I think it's important to learn is how many have heard of the whiteboard interview test that everybody hates? You've heard of this? I hate them. One thing that I think makes them easier to deal with is if you can get an environment that's a little more friendly, a little more welcoming, conjures pleasant memories for everybody. And I'm speaking, of course, of Christmas time. How many have heard of the advent of code? From me. Okay, well that counts. Advent of code, this is a brilliant project. Every year, Christmas time, Advent, December 1st to 25th, these folks release a couple problems a day. There's kind of a hard-ish one, and then a harder one is usually how it goes. And as you go through, you can see here the numbers 1 through 25. That's if you have done none of them, but as you do them, and I have, so I'll just log in through GitHub here for a sec. It builds up the little cute little picture for you. And what they do is they have these kind of story problems that are Christmas themed. So you have to like help the elves figure out how to make a linked list for some reason. Only they don't call it a linked list, they call it friendly or Christmassy kind of stuff. And so they're great problems to practice on, but then you get the problem of, well, what if I don't know how to do the algorithmic kind of problems? I can't just look at the code and understand all that. That's what always bothered me my whole time through being a student and going to engineering school and stuff was, how do you figure these things out? So finally, at the age of, however old I am, I thought I should write this down myself. And so I've started a little blog here, bgates.github.io. I call it software development for the newly non-beginner. And it's stuff, I used to teach at a boot camp back when we had the boot camp over in the Exchange building. And loved it, best job I ever had in my life. And my only regret was I wish I had more time to get past the intro stuff into some of this kind of stuff, some of the algorithmic kind of things. And so after doing the Advent of Code this past time, I thought I should write up my own thinking, such as it is, for all the questions. So You know, the Advent, I said, is in Christmas time, and so here it is just a couple weeks after Easter, and I've started to finally have things up online talking about beginning from Advent Code, day one, part one, and just writing up, you know, the problem and then what my thinking was to get all the code. So I have like a week's worth of stuff so far, and I'll be continuing to add to it, especially now that I've told people, because public pressure is great for actually getting work done. And that's all I had, so thank you. That's it.
Yeah,
Yeah, where's the,
HDMI. It's right there.
no.
Or you might have the AirPlay.
Oh wait, that's not HDMI. Oh, there's no HDMI cable?
There is a HDMI cable.
Where?
But we had problems.
I thought it's because he had an adapter. Oh, here, I couldn't see it.
Switch on.
The input.
I don't even know how to set up AirPlay. I don't have a Dell computer.
Yeah, so we tried it with go with this, like we were trying with Brian, I'm not sure. But the AirPlay is just a little, you see when you go to the top, next to the Wi-Fi?
Wi-Fi?
HDMI.
Oh, the Wi-Fi on my
No, like on
computer?
your computer, go to the top, and you see where like little Wi-Fi signal?
Oh, yeah, the little
Are you
AirPlay.
still,
Next to it, yeah, that's the AirPlay.
Brian, are you still connected? Oh,
No,
you're HDMI,
he
right?
wasn't able to.
So what happened, sorry?
He wasn't able to, so he AirPlayed it also.
Oh, he did? Oh, okay.
An AirPlay.
Because you gotta log into the presenter Wi-Fi, right?
I have
On the
no
presenter?
Wi-Fi.
No, presenter.
What is presenter?
Do you show it really quick?
I'll try to keep it short, sweet. What's the,
Every time we the one, once you're connected, it should show here.
It's like we can debug software issues, but we can't debug screen issues, right? AV issues.
I was lucky everybody had an Apple laptop. You had Windows and all that stuff.
No, I don't use Windows. I could do it off someone else. I can do it off this computer.
You just have to connect to the thing.
I could do it on any computer. It's connected, right? I'll just use your computer.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, I'll just use your computer, it doesn't matter. I don't have anything. I'll just use your computer. Sorry. Yeah, so I'm gonna kind of go off of Zachary's talk, all the stuff that he talked about with the video synthesizer, since I feel like a lot of people are interested in more of the animation slash almost WebGL and 3JS realm with all like the cool things that pop up on the screen. So one of the cool things that I came across is I usually curate things and look through things on CodePen. Who has seen the latest Avengers movie? I haven't seen it yet, so don't ruin it for me. Don't ruin it for me. But you know, like there's like these CodePen files that you can look for related to the actual parts of the movie. This one is CodePen Thanos.
Have you Googled it, Thanos? Have you seen that?
Wait, oh yeah. But that was on. Oh yeah, because if you right, you can just
Has
actually.
anybody done that? Google Thanos?
Yeah. You Google Thanos, and then you see this gauntlet right here on the right side. If you click on it, you know, like in the movie, I don't know if I was spoiled. Well, the first movie at least, I can spoil that. Like things disappear when he does things with his hands, right? So you click on it, some fancy magic happens, and then move, right? And then you know, yeah, just like you know, like this, and everyone's just gone. So I was kind of curious how this actually worked, and I didn't do any of it honestly, but someone actually published a blog post and a video, and it's actually a YouTuber that I follow that curates a lot of interesting 3JS content, kind of the stuff that Zachary talked about. So there's a YouTuber by the name of Red Stapler. He's like one of my favorite YouTubers for following for more of the interesting effects online, things that you can do as a front-end developer and you want to upgrade your skill sets. So I'm just going to talk about stuff that he's made, because I didn't make anything. So how that actually works, that effect, in case you're curious to know how it works, it's all based on HTML canvas. So what you do is you take an image of the entire thing that you're going to like, you know, right, vanish, and then you actually crop it into like 20 different canvas images. So one of the features of Canvas, actually Zachary was talking about it earlier, you can take a context of it, which you define, and then you can actually set pixel values in that image. And you set like, you take that original frame that's going to vanish and chop it into 20 images essentially. And then once you do that, you can start applying the different animation effects where you kind of like, I don't know exactly how to describe it. Maybe the video would probably be better to show. It's only like 3 minutes, but you can play through real quickly. Just to see, can show like what it actually does behind the scenes. Yeah, so you have that elements. You split it up into different canvas images, and then essentially what you do is chop it into pieces. You add all your transitions and animations, and you can use middleware library like HTML Canvas to convert that HTML file to an actual image into multiple images. And then in this case, he uses some different middleware libraries like jQuery and also Chanceman.js, which is used for randomizing certain values. But you can see it's all just using Canvas though. And yeah, the audio is not really good though, but you can kind of see what's going on though, just looking at whatever this is showing. And actually, you could probably put on the captions too. I like the captions on. But for the most part, it's just Canvas, knowing what parts of the animation frames you're going to change from top to bottom, and then actually applying the different functions needed to actually get to that point and the different frames that you're going to change. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Yeah, so if you're curious, I would check out Red Stapler for more interesting front-end content if you're really curious to learn more about the 3JS realms and the WebGL realm. That's pretty much it. And yeah, let's check out his realm.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for coming. That's a wrap up for this month. Next month, we're going to be meeting here again on June 13th. Same time, 7 p.m. We don't have a talk scheduled yet, but we have a date. If anybody's interested in giving a talk, reach out to one of us, either here tonight in the next couple minutes or through Slack or email. Yeah, we're always welcoming new speakers. This is a place for us. It's not for me or Bruno, none of the organizers. This is for, for the community. So if anybody ever wants to present a talk or suggest topics, also hit us up. Yeah, and I think that's it. Thanks again for coming, and I'll see you all next month.
Thank you.